Now, starting bag D, first things first is we've got to make up the shaft. I'm only going to make one because all four shocks are the same, just slightly different sizes. There's two sizes of shock absorber. So first things first is to make up the piston and then assemble it into the case. So we start off with these little E-clips. What you've got to do is get one balanced and sort of held with your thumb, and then use a small pair of fin nose and gently pop it on, and if it's gone on properly it should rotate just a little bit. Then fit a piston, and the second E-clip, which is a balancing act. You just want to get it on. See, there's pros and cons with pistons of Tamiya because they do solid metal ones, which is a pro because you haven't got to make those. But the con is if you want to tune him, these pistons are tunable. So the way these go together is I usually put a bit of grease and you put on O-ring, spacer, then I usually put a little bit more grease around on this style, O-ring, another little yellow spacer, tiddly little thing, until you end up with that. Because I usually say assemble it and screw it up, but then that tightens the O-rings. So when you push the rod through this thread, you're damaging the O-rings. So if you slide it on now and just put the cap on and just slowly wind it in, that way you have not damaged any O-rings, and it's done. Then the next part is putting on a nut. And that's what you'll end up with. We've got to make 4 of those. So I will get on with it, but as far as you're concerned, that is completed stage 24. Part 25 is filling the shocks with oil. Fill them up, get the air bubbles out, and then put the cap on. I don't like doing it with the piston down. I like to push the piston up, then put the cap in and put the top on. I find the shocks work better that way because you can end up with a load of pressure, too much pressure in them. So all you've got to do is pour some oil in. You're always going to give it a mess. Take the piston up, down, up, down. And then let it rest. And we'll do that with the rest while the bubbles are going. Now we'll take one of the shocks which has been sitting. We'll run it up and down. And leave it about, I'll leave it not completely up, but a fair way up. And then take one of the bladders, and you don't need it right to the top because you're probably going to have a overflow straight away. See what I mean? You don't have to fill them right up. So press it till it sits flat, and then literally screw the cap on. don't over tighten because they're only plastic, but now that's got a nice feel to it. But that, once these others are just done the same, that will complete part 25. Now part 26 is fitting a suitable collar. I'm going for X4 and T5, I want them a little bit firmer. And you've got to put the spring on and wind it on and then pop the collar on afterwards. So this is where it's useful to have protection on your pliers. I just use a bit of tape. And what you have to do is put it on, and hold it, wind it on. This is pre-threaded, so it'll go on pretty easy. And once it's tight at the nut, pull the spring and release, and that's one on, and then just pop on the preload, and there we go. And that completes part 26, because as I said again, I will be doing the others. I think on some of them you can't wind them all the way in. Well, that went all the way in. If they don't, then use a spanner and wind the nut back. But no, the short ones are okay. I'll do a long one while we're here, just in case. It's nice to check. In case they are slightly different. So we'll take it, spring on. Ah, well, that's interesting, that you don't need to hold it. That goes on with ease. So it must be softer on the rear. Still need the pliers to tweak it. And then the preload. For me, that's not a lot of preload, but they feel pretty stiff. But the shocks will be done. Now part 27 is fitting the rear shocks. They pop on the bottom and it's just a bolt, washer, tube and nut at the top. So I've just got to try and find those nuts. That's the only thing is I found them now. I was struggling to find them. So the two long shocks. So it's bolt, washer, tube, shock and nut. And then on to the bottom and push them on. It's good to have really long needle nose sometimes. Because I'm finding somewhere to get in to get this to click on. Yep, done it. We do the same for the other side. Nut. washer, tube, shock, washer, and lock nuts. And then we've got to get it on. I'll do it like this so you might see it a bit better, but you can see it's trying to find somewhere to sort of purchase to pop it. That was tricky, but that completes part 27. Part 28 is fitting the front shocks. These are a bit easier. They bolt at the top and they use a pin at the bottom, so I haven't got to force them on. So these ones, you sort of work backwards. You put a tube in the top of the shock, screw, washer, and a flange nut on the other side. That is so different, it's different to the rear. And then I might actually change the preload on the front. It seems a lot. Do I forgot to do? I forgot to put the tube in. Might pay to turn it the other way up. And the tube don't want to go in. And we got there in the end. So with the tube in, try and get this into place. It almost feels like I've got it wrong somehow. You know, it sounds silly, but it's not easy to get this to line up. That was a bit forced. Yeah. No, it's not too bad, that preload. Yeah, that was a bit tricky to get on. I might be tempted to work back the opposite way on this one. I thought this would be much easier on the front. So we've shot parts everywhere we're going to have to look for. That one went in. And it's easier to do it, I think, like this. There you go, it slides in easy. That is under tension. But it's easier to do it that way than trying it from the other. Just sent the tube flying. There we go, we got it in the end, but they don't fit nice on the front. It's almost like they needed a different bottom to them. But I've used the correct bottom parts on the rear because they're pop on, so that's it. Right, so that completes part 28. Now part 29 is fitting the front bumper. There's 2 screws from above, and there's a screw from the front which has got a spring washer and 2 washers and a bit of thread lock. So what I'm going to do is flip it over and lay the bumper on. Where's my cutters? There's a horrible knob. That's better, a lot lower. And we'll flip it back. And the screws go way down in there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a screw hole down there. There we go, I think I've got it running. These are better to fit first because they're at the back and they're not adjustable where the other one is, and the other one is right down there. This is sometimes where it pays to have a pair of these sprung tweezers. They're not cheap, but you can put it on like that, lay it in, screwdriver on, and wind the screw in. It's easy as that. Right, so we'll flip it over. Yep, it just about lines up. That is close. So we'll put a thread lock on. That one's finished. Using up old ones to save the new ones. Always good. Two washers. And you've got to try and get it in to that. You remember that hexagon bit we've put on the gearbox, that piece of metal? Oh. Part 30 is putting the wheels and tyres on. They are directional, they point a direction, so you've got to make sure you make them opposing. So those two are pointing down with the discs up, that one's pointing down and that one's pointing down, so we know the wheel's got to be discs to this side. And what you do is you force it in to the tyre and twist and pull it a bit. Double check you've got it the right way before you go too mad. Get it so far and go the other side. And then tease them on so they're fully on. These are really hard to get on. You have to force them a bit at times until you're happy with them inner and outers. Banging helps. And that completes part 30. We've got the tyres on, but there's no way I was going to show you me struggling with 4 of them. Part 31 is putting the wheels and tyres on. So don't forget to note the direction of the tyres, that the arrows are going downwards for forwards rotation. So what we'll have to do is pull off the clip. I'm going to turn it so it's flat, because it's easy to put in this little pin in. These are easy to lose. And then push on the triangle. These don't use hexes, but you can convert them to hex if you wanted to. There we go. And what I'm going to do is turn it on its side. That makes it a bit easier, and we want forward drive downwards. And then put the nut on. Take up most of it, and then we'll have a quick glance before final tighten. Yeah, because you've got to make sure it's located in the right place. And we are. So we'll do the other front and done with it, because doing this side we know the tyre doesn't matter because we've already got the correct one on. Put on the adapter and then put the right wheel on. I'm going to have a quick look underneath. Yeah, we're in. So I know I can wind that all the way. And then for the rear, this side, we want downward drive. Stand it up. Put the pin in. Yeah, if you turn it, it sort of drops on, and as long as the it's showing through just a bit of bolt, you should be spot on. And then the last one, we'll I think I'm still going to have to work on these tyres a little bit. Still not fully seated, that one. There we go, we got the clips back. And that concludes part 31. Here we are, this is part 32, and it's fitting the battery cover on holder. All you do is you hook it in the front and push down at the rear. And of course I've got to trim a little bit off the off the cover for the ESC. What it's doing, it's hitting the standoff. It's not hitting the ESC, it's hitting one of the plugs. So we'll just trim that unless I can get it. No, it's cleared. So what was it catching on? I think you just got to be a bit careful when you close it. Well, that concludes part 32 and bag D.